When Taylor Swift walked down the busy city sidewalk, she wasn't looking for anything special that day. People hurried fast, eyes glued to phones or focused straight ahead. Nobody noticed the famous singer with her cap pulled low, sunglasses hiding her face. Then she saw him, a teenage boy sitting behind a small folding table covered with paintings. Ethan Carter looked tired, his thin frame hunched slightly on a metal stool. His hands showed paint stains from hours of work. Next to his artwork stood a handwritten sign that made Taylor pause. Original art funding my cancer treatment. While everyone else rushed by, Taylor slowed down. She watched as people glanced at Ethan's stand, some reading his sign with sad smiles before continuing on their way. Each time someone walked away without buying, Ethan's shoulders dropped a little more, but he kept arranging his paintings, hoping the next person might stop. This wasn't just a boy trying to make extra money. This was someone using his talent to fight for his life. Taylor felt drawn to his determination. As she stepped closer to his stand, neither of them knew this chance meeting would change everything. The city was alive with movement and sound. Street musicians played on corners, tourists snapped photos, and business people hurried past with coffee cups in hand. In the middle of it all sat Ethan at his small art stand, just a folding table and metal stool he'd borrowed from home. His paintings were carefully arranged on the table, each one representing hours of work. Some showed city landscapes with vibrant colors, others captured quiet moments in nature. Ethan had spent every ounce of energy he had creating them, often painting late into the night when he couldn't sleep through the pain. The small sign propped against his table told his story in just a few words. Original art funding my cancer treatment. He debated whether to be so direct, but his last hospital visit had left no room for pride. The medical bills were piling up, and his parents were already working extra jobs to cover what they could. By mid-afternoon, Ethan's body was betraying him. The chemo from last week left him exhausted, his muscles aching as he shifted on the hard stool. Occasionally, a wave of nausea would wash over him, forcing him to close his eyes and breathe deeply until it passed. He'd only sold one painting today, to an elderly couple who seemed more motivated by pity than appreciation for his art. Still, he stayed. He had to. Each painting sold meant one step closer to the treatment he needed. So Ethan straightened his shoulders, ignored the pounding in his head, and smiled at the next person who slowed down near his stand, hoping this time would be different. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows over the sidewalk, a tall woman approached Ethan's stand. She wore simple jeans, a loose sweater, and a baseball cap pulled low over blonde hair. Dark sunglasses covered her eyes as she studied the paintings with genuine interest. Ethan perked up at having a potential customer. After hours of rejection, someone was actually looking at his work. He didn't recognize her. He was too tired, too focused on making a sale. "Did you paint all of these?" she asked, her voice melodic and somehow familiar. "Yes," Ethan nodded, sitting up straighter despite his exhaustion. "Every one of them." She picked up a canvas showing a sunset over water, with musical notes subtly blended into the clouds. Her fingers traced the edge gently. "This one is special," she said. "I love how you worked music into the scene." Ethan smiled, surprised she'd noticed that detail. "Music helps me through the treatments. Sometimes I imagine the sky is filled with songs." "Treatments?" she asked, glancing at his sign. Ethan hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I have leukemia, been fighting it for almost 2 years. The latest round of chemo isn't covered by our insurance, so—" He gestured to his artwork. The woman was quiet for a moment, still holding the painting. "How much has this journey inspired your art?" No one had asked him that before. Most people just offered sympathy or avoided the topic entirely. "Everything I paint now has more meaning," Ethan explained, warming to her genuine interest. "When you're not sure how many sunsets you have left, you notice every color differently." She nodded slowly, understanding in her expression. Art can be healing, not just by paying for treatment, but for your spirit too. For the first time that day, Ethan felt seen, not as a sick kid selling paintings for pity, but as an artist with something meaningful to share. The woman held the sunset painting with the hidden musical notes, studying it with appreciation that went beyond casual interest. After a moment of contemplation, she looked back at Ethan. "I'd like to buy this one," she said, her voice gentle yet decisive. Ethan's heart leapt. Another sale meant being that much closer to affording his treatment. "That one is $200, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, not wanting to show just how desperately he needed this money. The woman nodded, but instead of reaching for cash, she opened a small purse and pulled out something Ethan hadn't seen anyone use in years, a checkbook. "Do you take checks?" she asked, already uncapping a pen. Sure," Ethan replied, confused by this unexpected turn. Most people his age didn't even know what checks were anymore. As she began writing, Ethan tried to make conversation. "That's my favorite painting, actually. Took me 3 nights to get the music notes to blend naturally with the clouds." She smiled without looking up, focused on writing. "It speaks to me. There's emotion in every brushstroke." When she finished, she tore the check from the book and handed it to Ethan. He took it automatically, a polite "thank you" already forming on his lips before he actually looked down. His breath caught. His hands began to shake. The check wasn't for $200. The amount written in neat handwriting read $50,000. Ethan blinked hard, certain he was hallucinating. Maybe the chemo was affecting his vision. He looked up at the woman, who had removed her sunglasses, her eyes kind but determined. "This can't be right," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the street noise. "You meant $500, maybe?" "No," she said simply. "That's the correct amount." That's when it hit him. The familiar voice, the blonde hair under the cap, the way she had noticed the musical elements in his painting. As she stood there, the realization crashed over him like a wave. You're Taylor Swift," he breathed, his words more air than sound. She smiled, confirming his realization. "And you're an artist who deserves a chance to keep creating." Ethan stared at the check again, unable to process what was happening. This amount wasn't just a purchase. It was life-changing. It covered his treatments with money left over. It meant his parents wouldn't lose their home. It meant he could focus on healing instead of worrying. "I can't accept this," he said, even as his fingers tightened around the paper, his body betraying his words. "It's not charity," Taylor said firmly. "That painting is worth every penny to me. The way you've woven music and light together, that's something special." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, his vision blurring. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to ordinary people like him. Yet the check in his trembling hand was real. Taylor Swift, the global superstar his sister idolized, was standing at his humble art stand on an ordinary Tuesday, changing his life with a single gesture. At first, no one noticed the interaction between Ethan and Taylor. The city moved on as it always did, fast, distracted, unaware of the life-changing moment unfolding on the sidewalk. But then a teenage girl with earbuds dangling from her neck stopped mid-step, her eyes growing wide as she stared at Taylor. "Wait!" she gasped, her voice rising with excitement. "Is that Taylor Swift?" The girl's words rippled through the crowd like electricity. Heads turned, conversations halted. A man nearly walked into a lamppost as he did a double-take. Within seconds, the energy around Ethan's small art stand completely transformed. "It is her," someone else confirmed. Phones appeared from pockets and purses, raised high to capture the moment. A group of college students rushed closer, their voices a mix of disbelief and excitement. "What's happening?" A businessman who had walked past Ethan's stand earlier without a second glance now backtracked, curiosity drawing him in. He looked at Taylor, then at Ethan, then at the stack of paintings. His eyes caught sight of the check still clutched in Ethan's trembling hands. Wait, did she just buy one of his paintings? The businessman asked loudly. A woman nearby gasped. For $50,000. I just saw the check. The crowd exploded with excitement. People who had ignored Ethan all day now swarmed his stand, examining every painting with newfound interest. If Taylor Swift saw value in this boy's art, surely it must be special. I'll take this one, a woman in a blue dress called out, grabbing a cityscape and pulling out her wallet. How much for the forest scene? A man asked, already counting bills. Ethan couldn't keep up. People who wouldn't even look his way minutes ago were now fighting over his paintings. A teenage girl pulled out her phone and turned to her mother. Mom, I need cash now. I want one before they're all gone. Throughout the chaos, Taylor remained calm. She watched as Ethan's life transformed before his eyes, a small smile playing on her lips. When the crowd's attention shifted briefly to a painting being purchased, she leaned in slightly. Just keep painting, she whispered to Ethan. This is just the beginning for you. Then, with the subtle grace that had allowed her to navigate fame for years, Taylor slipped away. No grand announcement, no speech about her generosity, just a quiet exit that kept the focus where she wanted it, on Ethan and his art. As she walked away, disappearing into the crowd, she heard the continuing excitement behind her. Ethan's table was now surrounded by eager customers, his paintings being purchased one after another. His sign about funding cancer treatment was being photographed, his story spreading from person to person. Taylor smiled to herself. She had changed one life today, with a gesture that would ripple outward in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And somewhere behind her, a boy who had been invisible to the world just minutes ago was now being seen for exactly what he was, an artist with a future. By the time Ethan got home that night, his phone was on fire. Notifications flooded his screen, the constant ping, ping, ping of messages and alerts making his head spin. At first, he thought something was wrong. Then he saw the headlines. Taylor Swift buys teens painting for $50,000 to fund his cancer treatment. Pop star makes cancer-stricken boy's art dreams come true in most unexpected way. Teens art stand becomes the talk of the nation after surprise visit from Taylor Swift. His photo was everywhere. A single image of Taylor Swift standing at his tiny art booth, holding the sunset painting with musical notes, was now plastered across news sites, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The video someone had taken of the moment she handed him the check had over 3 million views and climbing. Ethan couldn't breathe. His best friend Lucas called first. Ethan, you are literally everywhere. I'm watching you on the news right now. I don't even know what's happening, he whispered, staring at the endless wave of comments and shares. Then the messages started coming in, not just from strangers, but from buyers. People from all over the country, all over the world, wanted his paintings. Hi, Ethan. I'd love to buy a piece of your work. Do you ship to Texas? Your story inspired me so much. I'd like to commission a painting. Any price, just name it. My son is also fighting cancer. Your strength gives us hope. I'd love to buy something to support you. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled through. Dozens of messages turned into hundreds, then thousands. Orders, donations, requests for interviews flooded in faster than he could process them. Then the email that stopped him cold. Subject: Gallery Exhibition Opportunity. He clicked on it with trembling fingers. A prestigious gallery owner in New York wanted to showcase his work. Ethan, your artwork speaks volumes about resilience and hope. We would be honored to feature your collection in our upcoming exhibition. Your talent, combined with your extraordinary story, has touched millions. Let's talk. He pressed a hand against his chest. feeling his heart hammer against his ribs. This was real. He wasn't just selling paintings anymore. He had become a symbol of something larger than himself. His art, once just a personal escape from pain, was now speaking to people across the world. 1 month later, Ethan walked into the hospital for his treatment. This time, there was no dread about the bills. The financial coordinator met him with a smile. All your treatments are covered, Ethan. Past, present, and future. The $50,000 from Taylor was just the beginning. The sold-out collection from his impromptu sidewalk gallery had brought in enough to cover his medical expenses. The commissioned pieces people were requesting would support his family for months. And the upcoming gallery exhibition promised something he'd never dared to dream of before: a real career as an artist. The chemo was still difficult. The physical pain hadn't changed. But the crushing weight of financial worry that had once made recovery seem impossible was gone. For the first time since his diagnosis, Ethan could focus solely on healing and painting the future he now knew was possible. 6 months later, Ethan sat in the familiar hospital room for the last time. Dr. Patel entered with a smile that said everything before words were needed. "Your tests are clear, Ethan. The treatment worked. You're in remission." His parents, who had spent countless hours in these chairs, broke down in tears of relief. His mother grabbed his hand so tightly it almost hurt, but Ethan welcomed the pressure, a reminder that he was here, he was alive, and against all odds, he had won. That evening, as he packed away the hospital items he'd never need again, a delivery arrived at their door. Inside was a simple white envelope with his name handwritten on the front. Ethan opened it carefully, his fingers still weak but steady enough now to unfold the note inside. "Ethan, I saw your exhibition online. Your newest paintings show even more heart than the one hanging in my home. Never stop telling your story through art. The world needs your voice now more than ever. Taylor." He carefully folded the note and placed it in his sketchbook next to the newspaper clipping from his first gallery opening. The exhibition had sold out completely, with critics calling him the voice of a new generation and an artist whose work transcends his personal struggle to speak universal truths. A year after that chance meeting on a sidewalk, Ethan stood in his own studio space. Canvases lined the walls, some completed, others works in progress. His new collection, Unexpected Miracles, was set to open in galleries across the country next month. Art schools had offered scholarships, collectors competed for his paintings, and a book about his journey was in the works. But more important than success was what he did every month: visiting children's cancer wards with art supplies, teaching young patients that their stories mattered, that their pain could transform into something beautiful. Each time he helped a child create their first painting, he saw himself on that sidewalk, desperate and unseen, until one person stopped and changed everything. Life could change in an instant. This was the lesson Ethan carried forward. Hope could appear when you least expected it, sometimes in the form of a stranger who saw value in you when the rest of the world walked by. His brush strokes now told this story, that even in our darkest moments, miracles could be just around the corner, waiting for the perfect moment to transform our lives forever.